Hello, hello, and thank you for joining me for my first daytime stream. Exciting stuff. So today, what are we talking about? We are going to be building an API boilerplate for Laravel. The reason I want to do this is because what I find a lot of the time is when I start building a Laravel project, a Laravel API, a new one, I've got to just trim back so much stuff and configure stuff and play with it. Just so much lead time for me to actually get started in building the API I wanted to do. So I'm going to be building a boilerplate today. And hello to everyone in the chat. Hello, Kat. Hello, Mark, Kelvin, Dave, Amy. Hi, B. My daughter's watching. Ludovic. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So let's get started. What I'm going to start with is going to create a new Laravel. We're just going to call it Laravel API boilerplate. We'll start it with Git. We are also, hello, Tom. Michael, wow, loads of people joining. Great. What else do we want? We probably want Breeze, to be honest, because it's a good way just to get started with auth. Probably going to want Pest. And I think that's everything. Let's have a look if that works. Which Breeze stack do you prefer? Number 3, Civu Play. Already exists. Okay, so I've already got something called that. So I'm going to be Steve and just call it API Boilerplate Laravel. It happens. Has. I have not seen Has for a long time. It has been many a time. Taking lead in a new API project at work, so it'll be helpful. That sounds great, Mark. Give me a shout if you want to chat through anything, basically. So I have now created it. I can now go create a project on PHP Storm. Here we go, create. And let's full screen it. So while PHP Storm does its thing, let's make sure my font size is adequate for anybody watching. What we want to do, I've got Docker up and running. Yeah, not interested in that right now. What we're going to do, we're just going to delete all of that README and just say API boilerplate for Laravel. This is going to be under the Treble account because that's now where I work. I'm the part of the DevRel team over at Treble, and part of my job is teaching people APIs, API education, showing you how you can build better APIs, and showing you lots of stuff like that. So we have got a fresh Laravel project. It doesn't have much going on yet. Can I zoom? Yeah, I don't need that one zoomed in so much. So let's just add the README and say update README. All good. Treble, no, Treble, Treble. It is a mission control for your API. So as you can imagine, me being me, APIs make sense, right? So this is really cool. What the boilerplate's actually going to link up to this so that you can get good insights, monitoring, analytics, and all that sort of stuff for your API, basically. Do I make an architecture design or do I just start and handle things? So yeah, I basically just handle it. Because this is going to be a boilerplate, I don't want to infer too many architectural decisions because you should have that flexibility within your APIs. You should be able to use the architecture that makes sense for you, and using a boilerplate which is heavily kind of opinionated towards one architectural style is just going to get in the way. So not the most useful way to do it. So the first thing I would like to do is, I don't need anything removed from there. Don't need anything removed from there. We're all looking good so far. This is pretty set up. First things first, 8.2. So now I can do a quick composer update, make sure that that is all good. Now we can just do a quick bump to bump the dependencies and composer update again. You can add those. Looking good. So the first thing I like to do is to get Laravel sales set up. I typically use Postgres. Always going to need Redis. I don't need mainly search or anything like that because I'm not going to worry about search too much. And then I like to add in MailPit because you've got to send emails at some point, right? Don't need Socrates or Selenium, Minio, anything like that. So 137 is kind of like my default. What I'd love to be able to do is to be able to like save those defaults. You know, like you could on the old Vue CLI installer where you could go, oh, save this as a preset. That would be so cool. All right, git add, git commit. Setting up Laravel sale. Oh, update -W. What does that do? So it pulls the updates downstream, not just your local. That is pretty cool. I like that. I like that indeed. So all of this is now up to date. One thing I always do is come here and I start adding my scripts. So we're going to have PHP Stan installed eventually. We have got, I like to put these in alphabetical order because I'm picky as anything. So here we can just do a quick vendor bin pint Stan, then we can have test. I just like to do PHP artisan test. So now I can do a quick composer require dev and Laristan. So within here, I can wait for that to finish. That should all be installed. Cool. So, and bin PHP Stan analyze, and I keep it basic to start with. So I've got Laravel Pint, PHP Stan, and testing. So first thing to do is come over to here and just say, let's set this up. We want a preset. I personally like PSR 12. And then we can start to define some rules. The only one I'm going to stick with right now is declare script types to be true, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. So if I just do a git status, git add these, setting up dev tooling, and then we can just do like a composer pint. Hey. It is pluralized. There we go. Adding strict types to everything. That is PHP. So all good, all good. Right, so that is Pint set up. We're also going to want to come here and create our PHP stan.neon file. Within here, I always have to do this. I always have to go Lara stan, come to here. I should have like a shortcut to do this, really, shouldn't I? And let's just add this and see what I need to do. So don't need anything to be excluded or any errors ignored. I know that level 9 is the highest, and that is good. So let's set that to level 9 and come straight ahead and do composer stand. For 12 hours, mostly coming from all of the author stuff that comes from Breeze, which we will eventually fix, which is absolutely fine. Right, status again. Where are we? Git add, git commit, setting up Laristan. Yeah, I do some live templates in PHP Storm, but not too many. I should probably create one. Let's have a look. Can we do this now? Live templates. Can I add a new one to PHP? We'll call this PHP Stan. Set up a default PHP Stan neon file. Wow, that is huge. Right. Let's drop this stuff. And we're just going to stick to that. So if I now come to here and say new, no. I have to have a look at how I can get it to be added into here. We'll come back to that. Not important for this, but hey. Right, so where do we start? First thing we want to think about is probably just spinning this up and getting it running. Let's zoom back in and sail up -d, get that up and running. Let's just open Insomnia because we kind of need it, right? We stopped using Laristan as it was making me add loads of code that wasn't needed. Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean. Right, new collection, my collection, new requests. And we are just going to do dismiss that and send that. We have got Laravel up and running. So first thing we want to do in our environment, manage environments, base environment, URL, hey, wrong key. let's just get this added. Not that. HTTP, localhost, close that, and let's just say that we are adding that. Close. What is going on with these environments? This environment. Let's just remove that. Save it. New environment. API. And let's say what we're using API. Now we're good. Right. Okay. So we can get started. Yeah, Insomnia is great for this sort of stuff. Some tools just really get in the way and it's quite frustrating. I just noticed that we've got no music going on. So I'm going to put some background music on really quietly so I don't have to just listen to myself. If it's too loud, let me know and I can turn it down. I have had people say that music can be a little bit loud for you, so I do apologize. Right, so headers, we want to always add the accept header. We only want to accept application JSON. So there's our initial route. So if we come over to routes, I hate that it adds it to web because it's not a web route, it's an API route. All right, cool. So the first thing I always look at when it comes to APIs is routing. Routings are at the core of what your API is supposed to do. So we can come over to our route service provider and have a look through this now. First thing to do is to make this final because it won't be extended. We don't need that const home anymore. Let's just remove these doc blocks that aren't needed. Rate limit 4. I'm pretty sure that's name. And this is callback. That can be static. And we could probably just turn this into a nice, simple closure like so. This is going to be max attempts. And then I'm pretty sure this is again name. No, key, value, key. Let's add that there. And then what I can do is, I can probably leave that one. That's all good. Right, let's just remove that bit. We don't care about that. We don't want to prefix any API mumbo jumbo because why would we? Right, and we can start this off as API. Then we're going to group everything from there, routes API, under the API itself. Nice and simple. We're going to configure our rate limiting. Max temps of 60. All good. So web is no longer needed. We can come down to here and we can say goodbye. We can require auth in here instead. We can clear that. And let's just come back quickly and make sure it's here. All good so far. Ignore the ignition stuff. So we've got email verification, forgot password, login, log out, register, blah, 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 blah. You get the picture, right? So we have that there. Where this is now set up to work. What I like to do is, because it's an API, we need to make sure that our IDs for our models and stuff are reasonable. I am back, yes. So you can either use like UUID or ULID. Personally, I like ULIDs because they're a little bit less kind of string mess. But for this, I will just use UIDs as the ID. We can then come down and do this. We're not going to have a remember token because it is an API. We can do the email verified at, name, email, password. All of that is all fine. This is a static closure, which does not return anything. So far, we're looking good. Password reset tokens. Let's just drop that. This again is a static closure. Email token created at, all of that is going to be fine. Failed jobs, again, I always end up doing so much cleanup. Static function, return void, all looking good, all looking good. Personal access tokens. There's probably some like PHP-CS rules I could use to do a lot of this stuff for me. I just don't know them yet. I'm going to be streaming a hell of a lot more now, which is going to be great. So we've got morphs tokenable. So that is something that could cause issues. So there is a UUID morphs, which is what we want to use here because we're using UUIDs, it's not going to be a strict ID. So we need to swap that over to UUID morph, which is absolutely fine to use. Nice and simple, nice and clean, done. And that is all of the migrations done. So let's just, I'll tell you what, we'll use a Git helper over here. Let's just commit all of these files, and we can say something like, what should we say? Getting started, root organizing, and database setup stuff. We don't want to do any kind of code analysis on this. We're doing our own stuff. So that is all of that done. We now need to come over to like our model for the user here, and this needs to say use has. Here, use has UUID. This needs to go before it because it's alphabetical. I typically drop that now. I also drop that and that. We can drop the remember token. So far, so good. Everything's looking good. Make that a final class because we don't extend that. We can come down to the factory and say that we don't want that. Again, another final class. Let's add the model in here for the user. Don't need a remember token. Swap this over to use a hash facade in case you decide you want to use a different hashing algorithm. The value is password. I don't like using the fake helper, so I can swap this over to this faker. The reason I don't like using helpers so much is because they are just grabbing a new instance from the container, and I've already got an instance added to this class, so it almost feels like I'm doing something for no reason there. I mean, I get the purpose, I get why people would use it, but for me, it doesn't make sense. So that is why I do this way. That returns an array, all looking good. This returns a user factory because it was a final class. I do love streaming, don't I? Definitely want to do some more streams where people join me. Definitely. Right, so that's all I need for that one. Migrations, seeders, sorry. So what I like to do with my seeders, typically, let's remove that. So I always like to use model events. Don't know what's happened to this. Right, so I always create a new user. Based on, who I am. It makes the most sense. So I always add a name, and that's Steve. I can't spell my own name today. It makes it so much easier. And everything else kind of stays the same. Keep these changes. That's all good. That's all good. There's a seeder. I keep getting issues with that, so I'm just going to reload everything from the disk quickly. It's all looking good. Where are we? Let's just add all of that. User model changes. I would love some doc block magic there, Kevin. So what's next? What is next? So with an API, once you've kind of got like your roots and stuff up and running, you need to look at other stuff. I have made some notes. I got Remarkable, and I love using it. So let me just pull up my notes. I'll tell you what, I could even share my notes with you. Let's open up Remarkable. Remind me to do that later. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to share this. So this is my Remarkable stuff. So we want to look at API versioning, response classes, a caching strategy, and lots of stuff like this. So let's start with API versioning. How do we want to handle versioning? There's kind of like so many different ways. I've actually turned Slack off, Cat, and put myself on Do Not Disturb because I didn't want too much going on while I was streaming. I'll have a look in 2 seconds. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the versioning. So API, right, all of this auth stuff, I'm just going to dump into the one file later, actually. Later, Steve, calm down. Right, okay, so that, I never use that. I hate it. Versioning spelt wrong. That is what I'm on now. So when it comes to API versioning, there's loads of different ways to do it. The way that I like to do it in APIs is to create a new directory here, and we're just going to call this v1. So we want to load our v1 root at this point. So within here, this is like the control file at this point. Always add that. So here we want to load in version 1, not 21. Jesus, it's not that old of an API. So we want to use the root facade. We want to prefix all of this with v1. We give it a name of v1. I don't need double quotes. And then we are going to group. We're going to use base path helper. And what we're going to do is roots API, no, roots v1 api.php. And to test this, I'm going to grab this auth and move it into here. And let's go a root list. And here we go. API v1 login, v1 login. All of the thing is now kind of prefixed other than sanctum stuff because that kind of comes as default. So here's where we're loading in our routes. Obviously, we can then go down and say, okay, cool. So let's add version 2, etc. And then that will load everything that we need. So we don't need that request in there. That is looking good. And we can say other versions instead. Make that nice and clean, nice and simple. So we now no longer need to look at that file. Our focus will be within here. So that's how we're doing versioning. So let's create a route to show you. And what I like to do is create like a test route. And what I typically do is I create files like this. I'm going to do a get request, and let's just simplify that one. Let's do that again, and let's see what we're getting. Okay, so that's complaining the unexpected token require. Right, so root as no within here. Let's just clean this up. We are going to use the facade again. We're going to say as well. We kind of want a prefix too. We're going to prefix everything with ping as ping, and then we're going to group again, base path, routes, everything inside v1, and then we're going to have ping.php. If I could spell today. And let's make sure that shows up. Ping ping. So that can be a /. That can be show, root list, API v1 ping show. So next we can go, okay, so let's make a new controller. It's all going to be API, so we can just do v1 ping show controller. This will be invocable, and we want to create a pest test because testing is vital. Actions always add cool. With prefix, don't need the full stop. You do not. You don't need the full stop because what this will do is it will just take it and hey, what happened there? Don't want that. That's prefix. Prefix, string, prefix, registrar, prefix. Nah, that's going to take too long to chase down. But no, you don't need to add it basically. So we've got our ping routes. That's just to make sure that the service is online basically. So here we can just say show controller. And the beautiful thing is that everything's nice and grouped. Everything for V1 is in here. Here's my API. That's like the control file. This is where I come to see what routes I have going on. And that's the ping routes. And if you ever need to add additional routes for pinging the service, you can just add them in here. As long as there's no name conflicts, you are good. That doesn't need that. That is going to be messy. Right. API ping show. So let's go back to Insomnia. So v1 ping. Nothing returned so far because it's just doing this. So let's add our strict types, make this a final class, drop that controller because we don't want to extend anything because we don't need to. Don't want any of that. Actually, that looks nicer. That actually looks a lot nicer. I did not expect that. So anyway, sorry. Okay, so when we're showing a ping, all we really want to do here is just return a new JSON response at this point. The data is just going to be a standard array. The status is going to be 200, which we'll come back to, and we'll fill in some other stuff a little bit later. And we'll just say this is a JSON response, and we are good. And we can send that, we get our array back. But what we want to do next is composer, via Tim McDonald, JSON API. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick composer search to see what versions there might be. Where's Safari? Where's Safari? What version are we on? Latest release. Pre-release. Okay, so I'm going to stick with the pre-release, but we're going to go for beta 4. We'll stick with beta 4 for now, because we want to be able to use JSON API responses. So the first thing I want to do is create a new resource. Okay, so we want to make a resource. We're going to stick with some of the v1 namespace because we want to make sure that we're using namespaces to control the versions of resources that we are using. So this can just be like a what sort of resource? We just want kind of like a message resource, right? Just create a message resource quickly. So what this is then going to do is going to say, okay, so return a new message resource. And the resource is going to be an array where the message is service online. So let's come over to here, HTTP resources, message resource, make this a final class, add out class strict types. We don't want this. We want this to return JSON API resource, which means that to attributes, we want to return the message as this. Sorry, my wife came to my door and distracted me. She's good at that. Let's just add message there. And what I like to do is I like to add the properties up here, because it just gets rid of any nastiness down here. So let's come back to here, run that. Ooh, object ID for array. So we might just have to keep this one as a JSON resource. Let's just grab that and let's just undo all of those changes, because it doesn't seem like I can do it with a standard array, which is somewhat annoying. Right, that's fine. We've got this. We've got this. There's our JSON resource. Let's drop that. Let's turn that into an array. where the message is this message. And let's send that again. Attempt to read property message on array. Let's just quickly do a dime dump on this. I would love a coffee, please, wife. Okay, so resource is an array. So what we need to do is this resource message. Right, as usual, this is just completely not planned. So what we can do there is change that to that, and that's a resource. And then within here, we are going to have message, which is a string. So we can use an array shape here. And service is online. Perfect. So what we're doing here, this is a little bit kind of lengthy. Yes, the boilerplate is going up on GitHub. I'll add that probably pretty shortly, actually. Right. Okay. Improvements time. What can we do to improve this? So, responses needs to move up a level. Oh, it is up a level. Never mind. So let's create again a V1, and let's go for. We are going to create a message response. This is the final class. Yes, Amy, we'd all love coffee. This is going to implement responsible, which means that it needs to add a to response. So this needs to return some sort of response. I'm going to use a Symfony component response, this one here, because both JSON and standard response, and most of them all kind of do this. So return new JSON response. The data is this data. So the status is going to be this. My wife made me coffee. My mug, everybody. Do you like it? It is a fantastic mug. She made me a flat white because she is lovely. This needs to come through and it'll be like that. Then headers, we can just set some default headers where we can say something like content. Type is going to be application / BND plus API.json, something like that. So then when we come to here, we can say public function. Well, what we do is we build up roughly what we want it to be like, and we abstract from there. So this is going to have a private read-only data. We'll set the type in a minute. So private read-only HTTP. Haven't installed that yet. So we're just going to say status. So now I can quickly go composer require, just Steve King HTTP status code. Yeah, that's definitely MVP is my wife. HTTP. Looking good, looking good. And then data. For our message response, this is just going to be an array. So that will work. And what we want this to be is, this is where I would add doc blocks typically. So we want message to come through as a string. And that's what our array shape should be like. It's good to see lots of people joining in. It's great having people here with me. So headers currently is that the content type is application JSON. Still coming through as application JSON. If I don't include that, oh, okay. We'll have a look at that. We'll have a look at why that might not be working. Actually, no, I typically add that as middleware, so I will remove that. So what we find is that this is kind of always repeated. So in my responses, I typically create a new concerns, and I'll do a new PHP class and say returns JSON response. This can be a trait. Come over here, I can just kind of copy that, drop that in there, add some properties to this, and we will have an array for data for now. Property read HTTP forward status. So that then works. For message response, we can delete that, and we can say use returns JSON response. Typically, we can also grab that and add that, so we don't need that part. And what we can do is delete all of that. So our message response returns a JSON response. And it's clean and simple. So that when we come over to our show controller, we can grab that, or at this point, and just say we want to return a new message response. There the data is an array. Where the message is service online. Don't need to update the status code. This can then be responsible. Delete that. Don't need that. So at this point, we can just say, okay, so it's got a default, show controller, done. And then this still returns exactly what we're expecting it to return. So that ends up being our simple stuff. We don't need the dot block at all. It's a pointless dot block. So that is our controller. It's 21 lines long with plenty of virtual padding. This theme, that is a good question. I'm just using a light theme. Using JetBrains Mono. I'm actually planning on writing a kind of a quick article on how I set all of this up. So that is that. Nice and simple. Message response don't need. All of that is all good to go. Ping is working. So we can write a test for it now. So we can come down to our tests. Delete this example test because it is a waste of time. Same with that one. Come to pest here. Delete lots of this stuff that we don't actually need or want right now. That is all good. This is going to be lazily refresh database, not just refresh database. And we're going to do that in all tests, not just the test we are in there. Test case is all looking good. Creates application is all looking good. So now we can come over to our tests here, come to the show controller, add some script types, and we can say it returns the correct status code. So what we want for this test really is just to do a get JSON. The URI is the coming from the show controller. And we want to assert that the status code being returned is HTTP OK. So now we can just come through and simplify all of these. And our test is done for that part, initial part. So we can just do a quick there's a test. And we've got 7 failed. So what we're going to do is in our auth controllers, we're just going to delete all of those. We're going to redo some of the auth and just write the test ourselves. So return the correct status code. We are looking good. So we also want to make sure that it turns the correct payload. So we're going to do the exact same thing, but at this point, we're going to do assert JSON. We have an assertable JSON bit here, where we can say JSON, that can be closed off. This can come in and we can say, we want to get the JSON and we want to say where the message is equal to service online, etc. Let's make sure that works. Now we're good. So now we can just clean that up. So all we're doing at this point is just writing some very basic tasks. Say, I want to make sure that it's doing exactly what it should be doing. There's a new way to do translations, I think, isn't there? So let's go have a look at the Laravel docs quickly. Let's full screen this. Laravel.com docs. Version 10. Localization. Let's just copy that, publish in the language files. Let's get the initial ones done so we know where we are. Where are we as well? Git status. Let's just add all of this. Git add, git commit. We're going to say getting the ping route set up. So all of our language stuff is done. So en, auth, blah, blah, blah. And then we're just going to do basic messages. So we just need to return an array. We have a service tag where we want to say that the service is online. What we want to do is say service online. So in our translation part here, we can just say we're going to translate messages service online. That still works. Service online. And let's make sure this works. Cool. Right, compose a pint. Compose a stand. Make sure none of the code I've been adding is causing issues. Auth service provider, login request, redirecting, show controller. Is it going to complain about that? Cannot cast mix to string. Always get that. Always get that. So now we're going to do a string val. There we get this. Might have to make my own helper thing for that one, just because it annoys me. So for now, I'm just going to ignore some files in my PHP stan until I get around to it. Exclude paths. Okay, ignore that. Anything to do with controllers auth. I'm going to ignore the verified email part. I'm going to redirect if authenticated. Login request. Anything to do with auth right now. And we'll ignore your service provider until we come round to authentication itself. So now if we run stan again, so we can make sure we've got something somewhat clean. Exclude paths, ignore errors. Why is it not ignoring it? Okay, so let's just ignore that and providers. Wait a minute. App HTTP, app HTTP, app, and app. Yeah, I'm going to be doing some kind of contract validation eventually, Ben, but we'll get around to that. So let's go get status, git add, git commit, PHP stan config, and translations. So one thing that's important at this point, I think, is for me to look at Treble. So let me log in to my Treble account. I've got my own personal one that I'm going to use for this one. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call this API Boilerplate. Local host. This is going to be Laravel project. Going to be no team members. Create the project. Right. Read the integration guide. So I need to get this installed to start with. Nope, I didn't copy it. And then I need to add this to my environment. Let's come over to my EMB all the way down. Come back to Treble and let's just copy the API key. I will be regenerating these after the stream, so don't worry, I'm not exposing anything specific. And once that is integrated, I can say Treble start. No, I don't need that because I already have one. So let's test it. Let's come back to Treble. Let's see if it is connected. Integration guide, what do I need to do? Oh, the middleware. I haven't added the middleware, obviously. So what I'm going to do is, the good thing with this is that you can add the middleware kind of where you want to use it instead of like everywhere. What I'm going to do is on my service provider for anything to do with APIs, I am just going to add it. Right, so make sure that this is actually working. Here we go. We've got 2 requests coming in to ping. Got a JSON response using an outdated HTTP. Request was slow, needs attention, no problems, wasn't authenticated. Quality-wise, we're okay. Security and performance were a bit sucky. So we can look at this request and we can start to see what's going on. Headers, accept the cookie that's being sent. Any documentation, data, any headers, all looking good. And we can actually see this request. We can go look at our endpoints. Any potential problems. We can start creating some API flows. So far, so good. Version 1, it's a GET request. It's detected that's a Laravel. It is on the local environment. Here's my boilerplate with the name, the link. And we're good. We've got a low API score currently, but we can work upon that later on as we build out the boilerplate. So one thing that we can do, now that we've got Treble up and running as well, is we can start looking at caching as well. So imagine, or actually, I know one thing that would help is if we come up here and if we come down to our cache driver and we just say Redis, please. Queue connection is going to be Redis. Session driver, we will use Redis. And then we can sail, artisan, optimize, clear. Just kind of clear any potential caches. These should start coming in. Here we go. Getting a little bit faster, I think. Yep. Starting to get a little bit faster, a little bit better. Here's the best one so far. Because we are dispatching this to the background now instead of doing it in sync, the API is responding faster. So let's go back to Remarkable. Oh, okay. Let's just go back to that screen share because Remarkable went to sleep. Treble streams in here. So we've got response classes, we've got API versioning going on, we can use JSON API resources. Localization we're doing, routing's done. Response type. Let's add that. How long have I been streaming for? An hour. That's not too bad for me. Not too bad at all. Let's make a little bit of middleware. JSON API response middleware. Nice and simple. Come down to that new middleware. What we can do is response equals next, because this is going to be after middleware. Request. This is going to be a response. We can return the response. Can I set? Yeah, set content type to be application slash key value. Cool. Application slash bnd.api plus JSON. Replace true is set, so we are good. So that is that part. We can add a quick declare strict types, make this a final class because it won't be extended. And now we can come down to our kernel, and we can just add this to like the middleware group because we're always going to want to do this. So we're going to say JSON API, response middleware, come back to here. And we have got our content type set and done. All good, rate limiting's there. Class origin stuff's working. Cache control isn't doing anything yet, but we can come back to cache. So, response content type's done. We'll handle errors another time, but let's look at the caching strategy. Like, we want to be able to cache things, right? Caching is kind of almost a vital part of an API. So what I'm probably going to do here is create a service. I'm just going to create cache. And we're just going to create a storage service here. Let's just test this out. I haven't really figured this bit out yet. We'll use a facade. We want to set. We're going to have a string for the key. So the key is going to be the key. Closure is going to be the value. We want an int for the TTL, but we're going to set that as something like 3600. Set is going to return bool. What happens if we remember instead? So remember TTL comes next. We kind of want to remember. And the value is a closure, so we can just call this like all we're really doing at this point is kind of replicating the facade. So this facade it's going to return hash manager. Was it a cache repository? I'm not really sure which one it uses. For now, we'll just keep it like this. Cache remember returns mixed, which is pretty accurate. Ignore that error. So in our controller, we just kind of like pulled this in, public function, construct. It says private, read only, storage service, cache. And for this, I just said, okay, we'll cast to an array, but we'll say this cache, remember, key service online. And we said that the callback was just this array. Yeah, there might be a nice way to do some middleware caching. I want to see if this is going to work the way I want it to. We've got them starting to come through. Still coming through quite fast. Speed-wise, that's not bad, considering there's no, like, nothing going on. I'll definitely look at some caching stuff like the response cache, perhaps. Response cache might be useful for this. So this might be something that we don't actually use, but we'll look into it. For now, swap that to read only. We'll keep it as is for now. Actually, no, we won't. I don't think that's adding enough value for the mess that we're creating. So we can just like delete that. We'll keep the storage service because we might want it later. So what's next? API errors. Errors. So how do we want to respond if something goes wrong? Let's say that we get a 404, for example. 404 not found. Oh, let me click that. Weird. So, getting some headers, getting a 404. So, when we get a 404, what should be happening? This is obviously throwing an exception. Custom log levels we're not interested in right now. Don't report on, not interested in right now. Don't flash and register the exception handling callbacks for the application. So what happens here if we just do a die and dump on E? Might just have to come to here to do it. Can we get that to respond? That is working. Test 404 not found. So there's a way you can do overriding the 404s. Not found exceptions. Certainly not found. There is a way on the router that I believe you can override 404 stuff. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Is there a way? Current redirect. Maybe like a fallback. It is. Okay, so for now, let's have a look at this and let's say A make controller fallback controller. We're not going to add the test because we're going to see if this actually works the way we want it to. Let's just add this. This is like the global thingy. Coming back as 200, okay. So let's get the request back. This should be coming back through here. So here's a request. It's a get request. Come in. Just serve a bag. What can we do with this? What could we do to make this nicer? We'll extend the controller. We're getting the request. Null. Got the root. Not the request. What can we do for this? Can we get like the router and see if it's accepted? Got the root resolver. I'm not sure what I want to do with this yet. I haven't really thought that far ahead, but let's come back to it. What we want to do is create a new enum. So an idea that I had here was that we could have an error enum. Something like the auth error enum. Going to return a string. So let's say docs.api.com errors auth 001, something like that. You know, we can start to really build out a good API so that we can understand things. So if we ever throw an error, we can say that. So then when we come down to responses, we're going to have a generic response here as well. So what we'll probably have is API error response. This will implement responsible. We want something slightly different here. We need that. We want to return a new JSON response. The data is null for now. So, public function construct. How do we want to return this? I did something similar at my Laracon talk. Let's see if I've still got it locally. See if it is in there. Keynote file recent. I still have my keynote. So, an error response. This is what I did at Laracon. So, title, details, status, and the code. So let's go through and somewhat replicate this. Private read-only ring title. And add the read-only string for the description of the error. Code. Now, code's the interesting one. So private read only. Let's refactor this and rename this just to error. Code and private read only HTTP for the status, and that can default to HTTP. Server error. So data at this point is going to be title. The description is going to be the description. The code is going to be this code value, and the status there is going to be this status value too. So overall, we're starting to look quite good. So here we go. I can then make this read only. Clean that up. I hate it when it adds all those spaces. It just doesn't look right to me. So there is our API error. The fallback controller can just say for now, return new API error response, where the title is oops. The description can be oops, I broke something. The code can be that one. Status can be and the teapot, and we're good. So the fallback controller at this point excellent. I'm a teapot. This all works. CV is not working for some reason, but we'll worry about that later. So that's almost an hour and a half in, and we made some pretty good progress so far. Let's have a quick look. Get status, get add, get commit. Looking at how we respond as an API. I just realized I've not had my coffee. My wife bought me. Oh, needed that. So we've covered generic stuff so far. We haven't covered a lot. Now, this API is likely to not really want to broadcast things. And one thing that I don't like personally, Laravel, is all of these extra things in here. So these channels, I don't like that. I like to delete that. So let's get rid of that. Console, not for me either. Which means that in our providers, in our broadcast service provider, we don't want that. And clean that up. And make this final class. Make sure we don't have anything we don't need. And then again, in our console kernel, we can start looking at clearing this up. Looking good, looking good. Don't want that. We know how to schedule, so we can keep that like that. So far, so good. One thing I also like to ensure that I always do is come here and say model, and just should be strict. Always be strict, especially right now. Eventually, like, I change that, but not straight away. It is, yeah, the coffee's gone a little bit cold, unfortunately, but it's still nice. So winning. Right. What else do we? Oh, typical. So let's have a quick look at. I've been almost an hour and a half now. What time is it? 12:30 almost. I should probably think about eating soon. Let's have a look at how we might add extra stuff. So let's say we want access to users, for example. Root get all users, basically. Name, we're just going to call this index. So we can simplify that one. And let's say, make a new controller. We're going to say this is under v1, users, index, controller. This will be invocable. And we want a pest test. So index controller, looking good. Simplify that. Come back to our API. User roots. Basically, we grab that and we do a similar thing. We say prefix users as users and users. You could do like some kind of glob magic to load this sort of stuff, but I like to be declarative, as many people know. So I'd like to do it this way. So let's go to index controller. Let's play this up. I'll probably publish the stubs for the next stream where I go through this, to be honest, so that I don't have to do this every single time. So handling the incoming request. What do we want to do? Our index controller, we want to basically just get all users if we're allowed to. We'll worry about kind of authorization later, but for now, we're just going to kind of get a resource and return a resource. So make resource v1 user resource. So we're just going to return a new JSON response for now. We're going to do all of this in line, and we're going to come back to how we can tidy it up. So we want a user resource. We want a collection. The resource we want to get is user query all. That's probably get that I need, actually. And for now, that will do. We will refactor this shortly. And what we're going to do to test this is we're not going to do it through Insomnia or anything like that. We're actually just going to write the test itself. So let's have a look at how this works. Declare strict types. It loads all users, as you know. It returns the correct status code. This is the important thing to check first, is are we getting a status code that we expect? Hey, Daryl. So let's do a get JSON quickly on the URI for the action. I like using action, by the way. This is a really cool trick that I was taught. Means that I don't have to worry about like root names and stuff when I'm showing this. So the status is just going to be HTTP, okay, value. Good to go. So let's just quickly Composer test this. Make sure this is all working. Where are we dying? This is where we need to come back to our PHP unit. Local history for this. I can't remember how to do this part. Yes, Tim McDonald is from the Laravel team. Hey, Alex, good to see you, buddy. So this bit, let me just highlight that and say history for selection. This bit is what I want. That is what I need. I want to do local testing. I don't want to do kind of messy testing. Let's just kind of do it that way. That when I do compose a test, it's not going to error out because it's going to use the local stuff. So it returns the correct status code. Awesome. We are good for that. Next, we want to say it returns the correct status code if unauthenticated. This is going to break a test, but it's what we need it to do. So this should be, is it unauthorized or forbidden? I think it's unauthorized. This one should be acting as, and all that function. We're just going to grab user here. Run those tests. This is probably going to fail. Yep. Received a 200. So what we want to do on these users, where we're pulling them in from our roots here, prefix as users, and what we want to do is just add some middleware here that says auth. So when we come back to here and we run the test, it should now, hopefully, fingers crossed, pass. And if it doesn't, I need more coffee. And we're good. It's checking the unhappy path as well. Let's just put this at the top. It returns the correct status code if authenticated. Yeah, I'm not part of the Laravel core team. I am DevRel at Treble, which we're using for this. So remind me later. Come back to Safari. And let's come back to our API boilerplate. And we're now getting users. We've got an error. It's telling me we've got an error, which is great. Line authenticated. That file, that's where everything is coming from. It's saying, okay, so you had an error because of this at that line, and that was the message, which is great. This stuff works. I mean, it should work. It's, API monitoring and observability, and yeah. So we've got a user. So one thing you will notice is if we go back to the treble, we want to masked fields. We want to publish something quickly. I want to make sure I mention this. I thought I'd installed it. No, I might not have done. Treble.php. Let's go have a look, see if that has been published. It hasn't. Let's reload from disk. Let's do a quick composer update. Let's have a look, see if anything's coming through in case the docs need updating. Rider treble service provider number 9. Now we've got it. Okay, so I need to update the docs. Note to self, note to Kelvin, we need to update the docs. So API key, project ID, ignored environments, masked fields. So this is great. What you can do here is say, I don't want to ever share an email address. So that when I run tests, basically I need to configure this so that my test data isn't being stuck into Treble, but we'll come back to that. Right, here we go, another one, view request. No parameters were sent. Looks like I need to Sail artisan optimize. Need to re-clear that stuff. Clear the configuration. Let's see if it's being pulled through. No, email's still going through, so I need to have a look at that. I need to have a look at why that might be pulling in, because that should be as part of the masked fields. So I can add that. Might just be me, the way I've set things up. I'll have to go back to it. How's WH1000XM? Are you on about my headset? Yeah, you are. Our masked fields. It does some stuff with that. I will be working on the SDK to make sure that all of this sort of stuff does actually happen. So yeah, it will be going through payloads as well as the body as well. So eventually all of that stuff will work perfectly. Right now, it's my, what day is it? Is it Tuesday or is it Monday or Tuesday? My third day in the job. I've not had a chance to look at that bit yet. But I'll come back to it. I will come back to it. Right, one thing I wanted to quickly have a look at is now that we looked at setting that up, our API score will slowly go up as we view the project. Quality's gone down slightly, so something's happened there. The error ratio. Performance is slowly improving. Security, because I'm not doing any auth, is still not there. So there's plenty of room for improvement on this. Right, so that is that. We're now getting users. So what I typically do at this point, this is probably going to be the last thing that I cover because I do need to go do some other work, I suppose. So responses, V1, and we're going to go and create a collection response. This is going to, Kelvin knows more about the SDKs right now because he's been here a lot longer. But yeah, all good. I'm not going to add those. What I'm going to say is use returns a JSON response. And then on this, what we want this to be, we want this to be either an array or a JSON API resource collection or a JSON resource collection or an anonymous resource collection. So yeah, this one can be many things. So let's grab all of this. This can be many things, basically. That's just how it is. So that this bit here can now, instead, we'll do it side by side so you can see it. Return new, collection response. The data that I want to return is going to be that. Why is it complaining? Why is it complaining? Responsible, got that, all good. JSON response, resources, yeah, all looking good so far. And then what we can do for this user resource collection-y part is we could probably go create a query for that if we really wanted to. But for now, I'm going to leave it as that. I don't want to force too much of my own personal behavior into this, other than good practices like this. We return a collection response with that. We can, of course, go and create here we go, a model response as well. So let's say that we're going to say model response. This is pretty much just going to do the same thing. So if I just grab that, comes the model response. Just say, there we go. And model response is done, because this will return singular and plural and arrays with a message and an array with nothing. And yeah, it's pretty dynamic at that point. So what I'm going to do now is just get this up on GitHub. So git status, git add, git commit, adding Trevor and a few other response classes, etc. Right. One thing I also want to point out before I do go, my loving wife, who is always supporting me, is doing a 100k walk this month for charity for our daughter who was born sleeping, called Vida. She will be doing 100k walk. Feel free to donate, don't donate, that is up to you. Like, share, show some support, because it's a horrible thing to go through, losing a child, especially an unborn child as well. That's terrible. It's can't even begin to explain how painful it is as a person. But Amy thought she would do something positive and do a walk. I will share this tweet with you so that you can see it. And feel free to like, retweet, kind of get some awareness, because a lot of people go through this. And SANS is a charity that is set up to help support parents and people going through this. They're really helpful for me and my wife. I can't thank them enough. Personally, I've donated to the walk because I want to support my wife. And, I don't think we would have got through it so easily without Amy. So thank you. Thank you, Amy. And Sans, you were amazing. So I thought I'd share that with you if anybody is interested. What I'm now going to do is, am I signed into GitHub on here? I am. I'm going to create a new repository quickly, because at Treble we had an old one, but it's highly opinionated in specific ways, and I wanted to have a look at what we can do with this. Treble API Boilerplate for Laravel version 2. It's going to be a public repo. Let's quickly create that one. And let's start getting this up on Git so you can have a look. You can have a look, you can have a play, you can do what you need. I will be adding like GitHub actions to this once I get to that stage. I'm probably going to stream this more regularly. I'm thinking 2-3 times a week I might be live streaming things like this. It'll either be working on like the API boilerplate, using the API boilerplate, working on SDKs, doing lots of different things like that, just to really kind of push API education and API integration education at the same time, so that people can start understanding it a little bit more. So yeah, it is now up. github.com/treble/API Boilerplate Laravel. You are free to go have a look at that. It is not complete. Please note, it is not complete. Do not use this yet. It is just me working on ideas and polishing things. There is stuff that really needs working on before you even think about using this, but it's going in the right direction. Feel free to drop a PR. This will be a template repo eventually. I could probably set this as a template repository already. So there we go. We're a template repository. So you can use this template, but don't use it yet. If you want to clone it, fork it and play with it, and we can kind of push PRs, absolutely fine, but don't use this in production yet. It is not ready. There is stuff that needs doing, so please remember that. Other than that, make sure to give a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed. Anything that you liked, drop a comment. Anything you didn't like, make sure you drop a comment as well. Give me some feedback. Let me know how you found the stream, what I can do better to help you with your learning journey, and what other things you might want to watch. You can come follow me on Twitter @JustSteveKing. You can find me most places at @JustSteveKing. And you can also come find Treble on Twitter. If I log out, come back to Treble. Don't want to go to the app or the login. We are Treble API on Twitter. Come and find us. Allow the cookies. Come and find us on Twitter. Give us a follow. We are currently on 1,144 followers. We do regular spaces, Twitter spaces, which is mostly ran by Kelvin at the moment. And what the focus is, it's all about educating around APIs. You know, API design, API standards, API governance. And we're going to be starting to do more kind of specific. So I'm looking at doing something more Laravel specific at some point on a Twitter space, where we really dive into API design within Laravel, what we can do, what the options are. And yeah, come give us a follow. That'll be absolutely fantastic. Thank you all for turning up. Thank you for showing up in the day, which I didn't think anybody other than my wife would do. Have a good day, have a good evening, have a good morning, whatever time it is. Thank you for turning up. And I will see you next time. Good night, good day, and have fun.